Welcome, everyone, to Elevate with V. So excited to be here with you. This podcast was inspired by my own healing journey. I aspire to share amazing healers and coaches to help us each elevate on our journey so we can keep aligning with our soul's calling and gifts. I can't wait to introduce my guest today, Rabia. I discovered her on Clubhouse and instantly felt a connection and resonance. She hosts incredible rooms with topics that are always engaging, meaningful, and creates a safe space to share diverse perspectives. And welcome, Rabia.
Hey, how are you, Vanita?
I'm wonderful. So I'm going to read her official bio. So Rabia is a nonconformist and has remained true to herself in spite of her challenging circumstances. She has held many titles in her life, but has always used her life experiences as the source of her wisdom and enlightenment. Over the last decade, she has been dedicated to her personal growth and mental and emotional well being. In 2012, she founded the Goddess Group International Women's Society, a nonprofit created to help women empower themselves because she always felt like a misfit and found it difficult to find her place. She's committed to doing her part to give back. There's a lot more that she's involved in, and we are going to get into it in our session. So, welcome again, Rabia.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! I'm so excited too. So, as you know, this podcast is all about healing journeys. So, I would love to find out from you what event or events kind of took you into that space of jumping into your healing journey.
So I think that we're always healing in some form and fashion, but consciously for me, it became evident that I needed healing in 2012, just prior to finding my purpose in life, which was the nonprofit, and I had my rock bottom. I hit rock bottom after a relationship had ended. And I just, at that time, it was a decision that something has to change. And I was the one that had to change of how I was doing things, of what I was doing, of how I was responding to life, of whether I'm going to choose to rebel and be this antagonist in my life, or if I'm going to be the hero in my life. And I decided to, so I was in a relationship that ended very abruptly. I lost all my bearings. I was in shock. It was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And all of a sudden, I'm left high and dry. I couldn't understand why. And it was a person from a different faith, a different culture, different, everything was different. So there were lots of reasons that would predict that outcome because of the differences. But at the same time, I didn't want the outcome that I had. I wanted to keep that relationship alive. So my healing journey actually happened because I wanted to salvage that relationship. So I said, I can't change anyone. I can't make anyone better. Let me just work on myself and make myself better. And so I went to meetups. I went to all sorts of meetups locally here in Toronto. And, I started going to Reiki sessions. I started going to energy healing sessions. I started going to the law of attraction meetups, where I was listening to coaches, and finally hired a life coach. I got involved with the metaphysical things like crystals, and I started noticing signs that the universe is talking to me. It was at that time I hadn't gotten over my father's death. Like, we lost him when I was 20, and I hadn't fully grieved his loss. I didn't fully understand or even accept, because he used to travel so much. I would think, oh, he's just going to come back one day. So I never really closed that chapter. So there was a lot of things in my life that I hadn't closed the chapters of. There were loose ends, and this particular event opened up the chance for me to start closing those loose ends. And I hired a life coach. Within weeks of listening to this Mind Power program, which I very passionately share, with my clients and with everyone, because it has made such a difference in my life. I gave my mind a tune-up. We take our cars for tune-ups. We repair our homes. An appliance breaks down. We call in the repair guy to repair it, but we never repair our mind. And so for the first time in my life, I repaired what was going on inside me. I became an observer of how I thought rather than thinking. So I separated myself from my mind. And so that was one thing. Then I would keep going to these uh, law of attraction meetings, and I hired a life coach. The coach that I hired, like I just said, that he gave me this program. And within weeks, literally within 4 or 5 weeks, I woke up with an acronym, and the acronym was Goddess. And so great ones dedicated to developing the essence of their spiritual splendor. That was the name of my nonprofit. And then I had already tried and tested a lot of these energy healings and Reiki, and oh my goodness, I can't even remember them all. There's this learning path technique that I tried, and I started learning about them. Someone told me I was a healer. I was at a shopping mall in one of the department stores, and the person behind me said, you have healing powers. I said, me? Because I didn't know what healing was at that point. I thought you take a pill to be healed, right? Or you have surgery to be healed. So I was totally far removed from these other ways of healing, the metaphysical ways of healing. And so then at one of the meetups, there was a lady there. She said, you're a healer. And I said, this is funny because a few weeks ago, someone told me this. And they actually said, you should look into Reiki. And she said, well, I teach Reiki. And so she and I communicated, and I bought my first crystal. And it was a quartz, just a clear quartz crystal. And I fell in love. I've got this house. Somebody gave me a whole box with crystals in it much later. When I said that I love crystals, they actually brought this house. I call it my house of crystals. I'll show you if we get an opportunity. But it just happened. And so I started speaking to the universe through these crystals. I also read the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And so I felt like I was that little boy. And so when I started holding the crystal in my hand, I could feel my heartbeat. I could feel that there was some connection between me and the crystal. And I just loved the way it made me feel. And all I said after getting it is that I'm going to get more of these crystals. They make me feel so good. I'm going to that store to get more crystals. And within 45 minutes of me saying this, so I was going to work, and I was leaving for work, and I thought I forgot my cell phone at home. And I drove back to get my cell phone because you can't live without it. I came back to get my cell phone, and on my porch, on my front doorstep, there was a Ziploc bag with 4 crystals in them.
Huh.
I'm like, whoa, I just asked for this, it was a Wednesday. On the weekend, I'm going to go and get crystals. And I just asked for them, and they're on my front door.
Wow.
And everyone got them in my neighborhood. There was some driveway thing going on, but I was the one who asked for them. There's a huge difference. I asked for it, and I'm like, wow, ask, and 45 minutes later, it's given. So my faith in the higher power in the universe was slowly being restored, that everything that's happened, that I'm healing from, is happening for a reason. And it's just, so things like this, that's how I started my healing journey. That there was an event that happened, and then I started connecting with things that I'd never connected with. And through that, I found other things that made me feel come alive.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. That's amazing. So now you get into crystals. Now, had you already learned Reiki? Did you step into learning Reiki or?
Right after that,
Okay.
right after that. So I had my first appointment, which is why I bought the one crystal. I had my attunement. And so 10 years, even prior to 10, so 20 years ago, someone said I had a purple aura. And I'm like, aura, what's that? So I was totally oblivious to all these terms that I now very casually use. Uh, um, so, and so when I was going through my attunement, for Reiki, all I saw here, like I saw my third eye as a result. I saw all these purples and mauves and indigo colors and white. So everything, like as she was doing the attunement, I just started seeing colors. I've always seen colors. In fact, what you have in your background, those were the colors that I saw.
Wow, love that. Oh my goodness. And purple's my favorite color, no surprise.
And amethyst are my favorite stones as well for in terms of my healing work. I love amethyst.
Wow. Okay, so then you like step into like Reiki. So what's next? I know you talked about the goddess group. So was that I know it sounds like you had a lot of sort of like coaching kind of things in that. Did you start to incorporate any of these things like your crystals and your Reiki in that, or was that a very different type of group?
Nope. So for me, the coaching came much later. I founded the nonprofit first. I didn't even know what coaching was other than my coach that I had. So it was this whole world was new to me. Uh, and so I just wanted, I just thought the reason I founded, well, after finding that acronym, the reason I wanted to do what I was doing is I said, I have a great life. I have all these things. I have a family, I have a job, I have friends. There's so many people that don't have that. They don't have the support. They don't have all of the, and here I am crying over a relationship that ended. And there are people out there that are suffering, and there's so much that they need support for, and they're judged and they're always not supported. So let me create a space where we can all come together in a non-judgmental environment and talk about our things, and I'll introduce everyone to all these modalities of healings that I've been using. And so I introduced everyone to all aspects. So whether it be mind based or cognitive based or emotional based or physical fitness or metaphysical experiences. So I just wanted people to get a whole spectrum of how healing can possibly happen. Because for me, it's not important how you find your healing, it's that you do find it. So some people have it through religion, others people don't. So for me, it was let me show all that's out there as much as I know and I can. Expose the world, expose people to these. Who knows what's going to help someone in their path? So, and then after about a year, I thought, well, I've got this organization. It might add value and credit if I become a coach and actually know, have a, I don't believe, like I said, like you read in my bio, I don't believe in titles like I've held titles. So people want to feel that you know something, that you know what you're doing. So, but at the time it just evolved. I went to Landmark. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Landmark. I did a few sessions or many sessions at Landmark. And then also where I went for coaching was CTI Coactive Coaching, which I think is an amazing institute for self-healing, because you can't help others until you have your personal stuff at least organized, if not fully healed.
Wow, I love that. And it's so interesting when you were sharing about what you were doing with the goddess group, because I'm like, to me, it absolutely sounds like a coach, right? Without the in quotes formal training of what a coach, like a diploma or a certificate or something like that. It's like that's exactly what you were doing. You were just pulling from everything that you learned and you were sharing it to say, hey, this helped me. This was a great resource. I'm just bringing in all these different pieces to
Mhm.
offer something to anyone, who you don't know what's going to resonate with someone. And I am familiar with Landmark. I too did a couple of programs with them. So when you said that, I was like, oh, yes, my goodness, I haven't heard of that term in such a long time. But I absolutely love that. So it's really interesting. I'm going to actually shift gears just a little bit because I would love to learn a little bit about. Like your childhood or like how you grew up. Did you have any kind of spirituality or any of that in your family growing up? Was it a pretty normal childhood? Was it just curious?
I had a great childhood. Very stable, very loving parents, a traditional home where my mom was a stay-at-home mom for the most part. She did work with my dad, but for the most part, she was at home. So very traditional upbringing, a great family life. We had dinner always together. The dinner was really interesting. My dad would sometimes pick a verse from the Quran or would talk about politics. So my childhood was great. Like I have very fond memories. My father, he lost his mother when he was 6. So he had this, for him, family was so, it was paramount for him that we all have stability, something he didn't have as a child. And so we had a lot of family things. We did groceries together. When dad needed to change his car, we went together to do that. My dad wore tailor-made suits, and every winter there would be 2 or 3 suits that he would make. Every summer, 2 or 3 suits. We would go with him to pick the fabric, to pick his tie, to help him find his shoes. So we were so involved with each other. I loved, like, I mean, I crave that kind of family. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. But then my dad was diagnosed with cancer at when I was, I think 17, 16, 17. And so that 16, and that, no, 17. And that started changing. We were starting to uh, live through this anticipatory grief where we know we're going to lose him. He was given a few months to live. And that's when I was already engaged at 13. And so that's what happened. That's something from my childhood, I suppose. So I was engaged at 13 to my first cousin. And so life changed for me. I became very mature at that point because now here I am. I'm going to be a wife.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's so interesting. You're like normal childhood. And then you're like, oh, but I was engaged at 13. I'm like, hold on. So you were engaged, but you didn't get married until much later, yes?
Yes, until 19.
Until 19. So in terms of your dad and him passing away, like, I mean, I'm sure that, of course, must have been very traumatic. But it does sound like you had a kind of a strong family unit that you all probably held together. So what was that like to be engaged at 13? Did that feel very normal to you? Were you excited? Were you like, I would love to know. I would love to know what you were feeling.
I had mixed feelings, to be honest with you. There was a part of me that was, we all dream of that prince who's going to come into our lives at that age when you're young and naive. You have, read these stories about this Prince Charming. So one part of me was like, wow, I get to meet my Prince Charming. And then the other part of me was like, but no, like I'm 13 and I'm 13 and I want to become a lawyer. I want to do all these other things and this is going to prevent me from doing that. At least I thought that's how I thought. And and so I was mixed feelings. I lived in Canada. It was unusual. I wouldn't fit in anymore to my with my peers, with my classmates. I would be judged. So I was a part of me. I had an engagement ring after that. Um, so it was like I grew up really fast in one way, but I was always really mature as well. So it, I had mixed feelings of having that experience. But my initial reaction when my mom told me that this was going to happen, or this was, I was asked that, how do you feel about this? And my initial reaction was no. It was on a 3-minute drive that my life changed, really. My mom picked me up, and I was in middle school. My mom picked me up from middle school, and we were picking my sister up from elementary school. And on that drive is when this conversation happened. And so we were parked in front of my sister's school. I can remember the parking lot so clearly, looking at the school building, watching my sister come to me, and I'm thinking, I'm getting engaged. And yeah, it was bittersweet.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I know that there are a lot of people who are listening to this are going to be like, wait, what? You were engaged at 13. Wait, how does that work? But again, this is part of, like you said, it's part of your upbringing, part of your culture, part of like the norm. I mean, this is not unusual, right? For, how you grew up.
13 is a bit young.
Oh, okay.
13 is a bit young. Now we're going back 30 years, right?
Yes.
We're going
Yes.
back a long time. Even at that time, I don't like 16 was that age. So 13 was, it was very odd because my parents left Pakistan to come to North America to provide us a better education, to provide us, and then yet they also wanted to carry the traditional culture. But I wasn't ever expecting to be engaged at 13. Nowhere in my upbringing was I told that this was even a remote possibility. I didn't know, meaning I saw it. Like sometimes parents and family feel like it's an understood, but it wasn't a conscious understanding that I had.
Wow.
It happened to me.
I was literally a surprise. You're like, it just kind of came out of the blue. Can I ask you, do you think it had something to do with your dad not being around? Because maybe it would have been delayed if he was around.
Sorry, I'm not following.
So, your dad had already passed away at
No, no,
this
no. My
point?
dad passed after I got married.
Oh,
So
wow.
so the engagement happened at 13. I was engaged for 6 years, and the reason the wedding happened at the age of 19, when I was 19, is because uh, just before I turned 19, uh, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. So he's diagnosed with cancer in January of 1987, 87, and I was married in August of 1987. So literally, because my dad was dying of cancer, my ex-mother-in-law came to Toronto to meet her brother because I was engaged to my first cousin. And she said, the kids are already engaged. Why don't, it would be great for you to see this happiness in your lifetime. And so literally it was like I went through a lot of healing around this. This was a big topic for my healing and family conflict, and there was lots of stuff that came up as a result for me, like my conflict with my family, with this particular event. And so I did a talk many years ago about this, about family conflict, and as I was writing out the talk, I'm like, wow, I lived I was able to give my father his last wish because literally it was his last ask,
Yeah.
and I would do it all over again.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing because just to kind of be in that process. I mean, there is also a level of pressure, right? Because of the circumstance that was around with your dad passing. There was definitely like a crunch mode, like,
Oh,
let's make
yes.
sure that this wish can be granted, and, let alone how you were feeling. But yeah, I mean, that is a very, different life experience than a lot of people might have encountered. So I really appreciate you sharing this part of your life. I was just kind of curious because I always like to have a sense of like how people grew up, because I know it's such a big impact on the rest of our life. And so I know that that whole experience or set of experiences molded you and kind of like pushed you along in your journey, right? So I
Definitely.
really appreciate you sharing that. So, kind of coming back to like how you were sharing, I'm kind of going in like different pieces of your timeline.
For sure.
um, but then kind of coming back to like, you're now like, you've jumped in to become like a coach. You're like officially like training to do all of that. So now where do we head once we've kind of stepped back into that place?
So I ran the nonprofit for 10 years. We celebrated our 10th anniversary. And I was just having these thoughts uh, recently about, we close some chapters. And so I officially closed the nonprofit um, after its 10th anniversary. I had evolved and become something different. And in that process, I think this is something I never thought about, that I can actually say that that purpose played a role. It provided me with something, it allowed me to do something. And so now, after this, I want to do like I work full time, so I have a daytime job, and I've been running the nonprofit. Been very active on Clubhouse. So Clubhouse became my nonprofit, which is what I would like to do for everyone, which is what I was doing in my nonprofit. So it actually was the stepping stone into what are other possibilities for me. And so I definitely want to do more speaking about various topics, about a very diverse life, from engagement at 13 to divorce twice. I've had an arranged marriage, I've had a love marriage, I've dated within the faith, I've dated outside. Like, there's just a very broad life experience that I've had. And I feel that I want to share that, not because I want to be known, but I think I want to give people the opportunity to know that coming from different cultures, you can reinvent cultural norms. So the podcast is a huge part of what I'm going to be doing next, which I am doing right now. So the Rabia and Sana show, we're two Desi girls reinventing cultural norms. So that's a big part. I think we have to reinvent cultural norms, and we have to reinvent them because we are constantly defining ourselves as a human being, as an entity um, that is not created by the surroundings, but that creates its surroundings. And
Yeah.
sometimes we can, like, I feel I'm universal, born Muslim, from that, but I feel that there's a lot more that life has brought to me, and I think we should all expand with what life gives us.
I love that so much. And I'm so glad because I was like, there's so much more we want to talk about. And of course, the podcast was a big part of that. And I know that's kind of your more recent adventure, which I've had a chance to listen to, and it's amazing. And, there was kind of that for me, a very strong connection when I kind of first came into your clubhouse room because I saw the topic and I'm like, ooh, well, what is this about? And then I come in and see you and Sana in there. And then I just instantly, I was like so excited because like you shared, like, you have a very diverse background. You have all these different experiences. And I'm the same way. Like, I didn't grow up in quotes the normal way. Like, yes, my parents were Indian, but I didn't grow up in India, so it's like my experience is very different. So sometimes it's hard for me to connect with a lot of people because their life experience was so different from mine. But what I love is, as I've gone through my journey as well, is that there's more that actually connects us than separates us. And I love, what your podcast is about, because I'm very passionate about that as well. It's like, how do we start to engage in conversations that, for if you think about it, a lot of these conversations are kind of taboo, like nobody talks about them. And you certainly don't talk about them in public,
Right.
right? Like what happens in the family stays in the family kind of thing. And so it's so much of this is about like we really have to shift some of those things, and the only way we can do that is really start to share our personal experiences
Mhm.
and to let people know that it's okay, that you can share, that you're not alone, that there are other options. And I think that's what I love about what you and Sana are doing. I know for me that's a lot of this podcast. And one of the key reasons that I was super excited to have you, which of course I adore you, I love you on Clubhouse, like you're one of my favorite places to go to. Um, but it was this aspect of your heritage and background and their similarity, and how we both feel very passionate about, like, there are things that we all need to talk about, and we can't wait for someone to do it. Like, we have to step up to the plate and just start having the conversations and including people. and
Absolutely.
and it's beyond, like you said, it's even beyond just like our cultures, right? It's like universal things
Mhm.
that impact many different cultures, but there is a lot of similar threads.
Absolutely. And you know what's happened is over the years, we have swept things under the rug. And that rug it's got this bump in it that we've got to straighten that rug. We've got to, you know, get rid of that. So that hump in that rug is what we want to tackle, because those are all the things that are taboo, that are uncomfortable, that there's a lot of shame associated with it. I think shame is a huge hurdle for all of us. And the unfamiliarity of a lot of these experiences is what's causing us to feel that shame. But it's not unfamiliar. So many are going through it, but just not talking about it.
Yes. And I have to say, like, even from just you sharing your story, like, what stuck out to me is, even though you had how you experienced a great childhood, right? And yet, you think of the cultural expectation that, I mean, I'm just saying, Rabia, at 13, for your parent to ask you how you feel about something like marriage,
Mhm.
how, what do you even go to say anything? Even if you were like, absolutely not, I'm not going to do that. Did you really have a choice? I don't know that you really had a choice. Plus the pressure of, I have to do this. I need to be a good girl. I need to, like, whatever my family wants me to do, I kind of have to line up with that. Or you go the other direction and be a complete rebel, which then that's a whole other thing. You don't even have that space to do that, right? Like, I know for me, I never really fit in. So for me, it was always sort of like, I don't know where I fit in. I mean, I literally would do just enough to make sure that my toes were in the space wherever I was, but I was just like, I don't fit in. So I think that's a kind of an interesting aspect too, right? The expectations.
Oh,
Like, how
yes.
as a 13-year-old would you be able to articulate or even have the knowledge to be like, no, I'm not going to do this? So, it's just really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I remember that moment so clearly as if it was yesterday, in the car when that question was asked to me, and my initial reaction was no. But it was basically, it wasn't that we're going to Pakistan in December and just think about it and let us know. It was, we're going to Pakistan in December, think about it and get used to it. Right? Meaning, I think, um, I know my parents meant well. Like, I have no doubt that they were looking out for me, and possibly everything that they wanted for me was in that person. or that person would be able to provide me. I think for me, the missing piece was, what about my goals and dreams? What about what is important to me, and how, why can't I do that? Why is that less important than my culture? Why is that less important than, like, why am I less important than the culture? Why am I less important than the traditions? And so fast forward many years, I realized that what I was grieving and my trauma was the loss of my dream, was the loss of my dream, the life that I had, because my dad would say, you're going to be the prime minister of Pakistan. You are going to be the prime minister of Pakistan. You're going to go to Harvard. You're going to do this. You're going. So I didn't hear that you're going to become a wife. You're going to become a wife. You're going to become a wife. Most people growing up in Pakistan, and perhaps even North America, in traditional families, the girls dream to become a wife because that's what they know they're going to become. That's their dream. Nothing wrong with that if that's your dream. But that wasn't even in my peripheral at 13. That wasn't even in my blind spot at that time. That it's a remote possibility, that I see this possibility happening. It wasn't there. And so fast forward to 45, when I'm writing this talk about family conflict, and I'm like, wow, the reason this whole thing happened the way it did was, I lost my father, of course. That was when I healed from that. I'm like, why do I still feel? What did I lose? What am I losing? What did I feel like I lost? And it was that dream, the ability to be me and show up in this world as that. But I'm grateful it did work out that way, because today I get to be a version that is so much of what my dream was, but so much more beyond what I ever thought my dream could be. So I'm grateful at the same time.
Yes, I totally understand. And it's something you had said earlier on about how, we go through this journey and there's so many moments when there's like pain and like just not understanding why. And it's like, universe, what are you doing? I just don't understand. This just doesn't feel good. And it's as we traverse through our journey and then we look back, we're like, oh my goodness, that made complete sense why that happened. Or look what I learned from that. Like I kind of did my healing work and now I can see the gold or the diamonds that are shining through to help me help me be the person that I am today.
Yeah, I lost my faith along the way. I always blamed my family, my parents, and sadly my mother, because my father had passed. It was, the blame was always on my mom, even though this was not her fault per se, right? Per se. Uh, I don't think it was anyone's fault, right? It's so, I was speaking to a friend some months back, and I said, it's it's no, everybody's right and no one is wrong. And they're two polar opposite things. Everybody's right and nobody's wrong. Meaning they do mean well. Everyone does things for the best of, especially their kids. As a mother, I've made so many mistakes, but I never once ever had the intention of hurting my children, right? So some things you understand when you live through things, because you have an idea, but you can't really have compassion for your mother or your father at that time of the decisions they made until you do something that has a similar result, right? So not meaning, in contrast, I have two boys and marriage was not on the agenda for them at 13. Uh,
Well, and I think that one of the things, and we all experience this where there is that place of like, oh, I'm never going to be like my parents. I am not going to do it that way. So, a lot of times that happens too. It's like it's almost like you're forcing yourself to like, I'm going to do the opposite of like what I experienced. So I know that there's many different dynamics, but I think for me, one of the key things is like what stuck out to me is like, your dad, like really, I mean, really, he's just like, the world is your oyster, Rabia. Like, you can do anything. And for
yes,
me, the contrast is like, here he's kind of putting all these ideas on your head. And then at 13, you're like, oh, but you're going to
I'm
get
gonna change
married.
that.
Right. It's like, you're going to get married. I'm like, well, was there any space, especially since it sounded like, your dad was like a huge cheerleader, not to say that your mom wasn't. Was there any space other than the, well, just get used to it? I mean, was there any place for you to express between that and getting married to say, well, what about like what I want? Like, what if I do want to go to Howard? What if I do want to become the prime minister? Like, was that
Right.
all just shut down in you because you're like, oh, well, that's all out the window. That's not going to happen.
You know, great question. Great question. Because it wasn't shut down for me, but what happened was I was exported to Pakistan after I got married. Usually grew up in Canada, but usually it's people coming here. It was the reverse for me. I went to Pakistan and I did want to become a lawyer. I wasn't as ambitious at that time. I was very complacent. I would talk a lot more than I did, as I think a lot of us do when we're younger. So, on the one side, I wanted all that. On the other side, I did love my life of luxury. I did love my life of comfort. So, there was these two things that I wanted, but I never felt I was smart. I had very low self-esteem,
Wow.
super low self-esteem. I didn't think I was even capable of living up to my dream. And hindsight, right? It wasn't, now I'm looking back at myself in the very low self-esteem. So there's another event that happened, two events that happened in my childhood that really shaped me. And I had an accident. I fell um, and lost my front four teeth. And I had never smiled because I didn't have my front teeth until I was 12 or 13.
Wow.
So physically, I didn't like how I looked. I had a very low self image. And then I had another thing that had happened was when I was just crawling age. I'm not sure if you can see this. I have a burn mark on my so I don't know how to even show my arm. Uh, I an iron, a hot iron. I was crawling and I tugged on the cord of an iron. The iron was still warm, and so it came and landed on my forearm. So I was living with these two traumas, and I fell. Someone was carrying me. It was slippery, and when I lost my front teeth, I fell off someone's shoulders. I think I was on the shoulders, so I went flying and I fell on my face, and that's how I had a deviated septum. I needed no surgery. Have this bump that I never had after that surgery. So, anyways, all these things. So those two things, I think, really physically, that the physical trauma was also playing a role in my life in terms of how I felt. Do I smile? Now I love smiling. It took work. I When I started smiling after my teeth went through a lot of dental work, and my dentist would say you're not going to get a dowry because your parents have spent all their money on your teeth. But that's another interesting topic about dowry, and a whole topic that could be talked about independently as well. But he would always joke about that. And I would be, just watch, I'm going to get a dowry, just watch. Um, well, I had this sort of, anyways, so just a side note. So I think what happens is that things shape us, we don't realize they shaped us. or they are shaping us. And then when I was 22, in Pakistan, there was a burglary that happened in my home, and that really terrified me, to have burglars in your home and you being, um, trigger warning to, sorry, I should have said that first, um, but there was a burglary that I lived through at gunpoint. So that really shaped my life as well. But that was later, but still, um, I was still young. And my older son, who's 35, will be 35 this year, he was present during that time in
Wow.
that. So that there was a lot of trauma that we take for granted because it's so common. Everyone goes through it in Pakistan.
Everybody goes through what in Pakistan?
Like burglaries, home invasions are very common, or
Oh
were
my
common at
God.
that time, especially. So, sometimes we bypass, so there's spiritual bypassing, emotional bypassing, toxic positivity. We bypass the actual impact of events in our lives by saying, oh, someone has it so much worse than you, or it wasn't so bad, it's okay, other people have gone through this. So we're not able to actually process that event. And that's what I had to do, as you were asking earlier, through the healing, is I had to process all these events and the impact it had on me, from the time that I fell and lost my front teeth, all the way to, my two divorces, because each of them has an impact. And where I wanted to be seen and heard and acknowledged by my family and my friends and my parents, I had to do it for myself. I went through it. If they're not doing it, they're not going to come and do it consciously, because they do the best they can with what they know. And if they didn't know this and now I know it, I can do it. So I became my mother, I became my father, I became my brother, became whatever I wanted. I said, let me do this for myself. And that's how I started unfolding my healing. And now I really feel that, um, the worst of it, meaning the hardest part of it, is behind me, and now I am able, in a much more healthier space, to be able to provide that safe space, as we do on Clubhouse. And I've been doing that in the nonprofit. We're doing meetings every week, 4 or 5 meetings a week, and during COVID, 4 or 5 meetings a day, to provide that space for everybody.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, we could easily talk for hours. There's so much to unpack in your life journey, but I'm so glad that we've been able to touch on some aspects. But I think, you've touched on so many important pieces. And, the self-esteem part is huge, like feeling deserving or feeling worthy. And, it's like so many different layers that we each have to like work through. And we can kind of say from sitting where we are now that, all of these life experiences, especially the ones that are very traumatic, um, those are kind of the places where we get an opportunity once we kind of look into them and kind of do the work, is kind of what kind of also empowers us, right? It gives us those pieces of ourselves to really build upon, and then like you said, like share and be able to assist and help others because of that. And so I know I wanted to also quickly touch on, I know you're incredibly active on Clubhouse. That's how I found you. And I think you have mentioned, not today but to me, that the pandemic also kind of like navigated you to come towards Clubhouse, and you started creating these spaces. And, I personally love all these diverse topics and things that a lot of people might be very comfortable having conversations about, and you talk about them. And I know you're doing that with the podcast too. So it's like just really exciting. So I don't know if you want to share anything about your Clubhouse pieces. Otherwise, we can come back to the podcast.
Yeah, so Clubhouse has been great. It is, we do topics on love, because the three main areas that have impacted my life, one is relationships, personal, intimate relationships, being divorced twice. I've got the Spark Factor Club. We want to create meaningful, meaningful, sustainable, lasting love connections. And I can't tell people what to do, but I can definitely share a few things of what not to do because I know they don't work. And then we've got the Think Better, Feel Better Club, which we talk about all things mindset and how to think better and feel better, or how the two are deeply connected and related. So we talk about, have conversations more on the mindset side, and then we've got the Rob and Sana Show podcast house as well, where we talk about cultural, more South Asian, because I have a part of me I want to give back to my community. Although the world is my community, there is a special, I have a special connection to the South Asian community because it's different. And especially for those that are living in the West, where you're torn between two cultures. And that, I think for me, that's where I sort of fit in. And I see that in Pakistan and in India, I also believe that there is this huge Western influence, and people are sort of now on opposing sides and trying to find a way to fit in. And I say that we weren't born to fit in, we were born to stand out. And coming into ourselves, when we're able to stand out, we fit in everywhere.
Ooh, I love that so much. Yes, I love that. And yes, so for everybody that's tuning in, if anything that Rabia is sharing, definitely come check her out on Clubhouse. I just wanted to also touch on, obviously, you can tune into her podcast. All of her information will be in the bio section. Is there anything you'd like to share, Rabia, in terms of, I know that you're a coach. Do you offer services? Do you have people who can come to you for that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I am a coach. I provide various types of coaching, life and relationship primarily, so which pretty much covers everything. Yes, and I do a lot of workshops over the course of the year as well. I'm actually going to be speaking at a summit in June, end of June, in Atlanta at the You Are Worthy Summit as well. And that one is really interesting, where I'm going to be talking about your self-worth determines your net worth. And I think that is a huge thing that I've also had to determine. My self-worth is far more important than my net worth, but it impacts it so much. So yeah, so you can reach me at my, reach out to me. My Instagram actually has a place in the bio, the Linktree link that has, you can reach out to me and book an initial consultation, and then we can take it from there. Or you can reach me at my email, rabia@rabiapiracha.com.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so many amazing things going on. And I know we've kind of gone all over the place today, Rabia. That's kind of how I do my podcast. I'm just like, this leads to the next, to the next. And so I'm super grateful that you joined me for this episode. I so enjoyed getting to know more about you and parts of your life experience and what you're up to these days. And, I'm a big fan of you and your podcast and everything that you're putting out there. So I just wanted to thank you again so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Vanita. It's been lovely, amazing to spend time with you and get to know you as well.
Wonderful. And
Pleasure.
thank you to everybody that's tuning in today. I so appreciate you. And there's just so much wonderful stuff that we've talked about. I hope something resonated for you, that there were some golden nuggets for you to glean out of this beautiful conversation. Again, please check Rabia out. All her information will be in the bio section. And I can't wait to catch each of you on the next episode.